This is your friendly neighborhood author, Jonathan, and you are listening to Season 4 of the Floor Rejects podcast, The Wells House Phenomenon. Welcome back to the Floor Rejects podcast. I am your friendly neighborhood writer, Jonathan, and last week, in chapter 28 of the Wells House Phenomenon, Warren and Thomas hatched up kind of a last-ditch effort to free Warren from his nightmare. They did their best to figure it out, but it kind of seems a little half-cocked, and this week we're going to find out if it works. Chapter 29. Escape. As Warren woke up, he felt a sense of peace that he hadn't remembered feeling in a while, a sense of inner calm that he hadn't realized he had been missing for a long time. As he crept down the creaking, echoing hallway, he sniffed the air, a dampness to it that he didn't think he had noticed before. He also didn't remember the stains running from the edges of the walls, watermarks blending down into the wallpaper and into the pattern of it. The kitchen is dark and musty, much less light and airy than Warren remembered it, although he wasn't sure that it was right. He opened the fridge and found a single carton of eggs and some old bread on the counter, and attempted to cook himself a meal, which he barely succeeded at as Edward shuffled into the room, ruffling his hair and stretching as he yawned. "Why didn't you wake me?" he asks, and Warren smiles absently, unsure. "I don't know. I guess I was distracted," Warren says, his mind wandering as if he couldn't place a memory. "Well, maybe we could go outside today, work on the fencing on the north side," Edward asks, and Warren nods, still letting his brain misfire as he tried to place his strange feeling of déjà vu. He fails to respond to his lover beyond a nod, and so Edward shrugs with a small discontented sound and leaves the room, letting Warren alone with his thoughts. Warren was starting to feel the gaps in his memory almost physically as he waited out behind the house for Edward after his breakfast. He was so sure he was missing things, time, memory, people, as he stood in the already beating sun. Edward's massive, erotic body comes lumbering around a corner of the house after a few minutes, a large sack thrown over his shoulder. "Ready?" he asks, and Warren nods, following through the densest part of the woods, all the way through it, past the watering hole, past what looked like a burned-out fire pit that made him feel that déjà vu again, and all the way downhill through the thicket until they got to an ancient-looking, rotten fence that Edward gestured towards. "I'm going to get some new boards. I'll be right back, love," Edward says, pecking Warren on the lips, who reciprocates robotically as thoughts about the strange little clearing with the circle of burned rocks enter his mind. It felt so familiar, as if he'd been there in another life, or in a dream. He shakes his head, trying to clear it after Edward stomps away through the brush, and Warren is left alone with the humming of the cicadas in the trees. He's almost grasped the meaning of that clearing when Edward comes back into the area, and the thought and memory is lost again. "Maybe once we get this done we can fool around. I need it. It's been too long," Edward says, and that piques Warren's interest. He looks over to Edward, who's already squatted down to the fence, and walks over quietly, stopping behind him and kneeling to wrap his thin arms around the bulky man, who hums happily. "I've missed you these past few days, lover," Edward says, as he barehandedly rips a rotting plank from the fence posts. Warren smiles indulgently, but he registers the man's hot skin against his palms, and he has a flash, a memory of another body pressed against his hands, but smaller, slighter in stature, and similar to Edward's. As he tries to get his memory to unlock it, Edward begins to hammer the new board into place, interrupting Warren once again. He draws back, moving to sit against a tree nearby, trying again to clear the fog. He puts his head in his hands, blocking out as much noise as possible, and delves into his own mind. He starts first with the kitchen. He focuses on it, seeing it as a memory, bright, clean, filled with happiness in his mind after a few intense moments of focusing. He can see Lila standing at the island cooking and smiling at him. He locks the memory down, noting it, and trying to think forward linearly, thinking next of the clearing. This was a much harder thing, but he couldn't seem to get it to be the same as the kitchen. But he knew that he knew the place, that he valued the place. Then he thought to the feeling of Edward's skin. The heat, abnormal for most people, was so familiar to Warren from the eldest brother, but as he laid there against the tree, he began to get the notion that there was someone else. Someone else he had touched, someone else with that heat. As the hammering stops, Warren can almost see him, see the face that he was trying to conjure as he feels hands on his shoulders. They shake him gently, and he looks up to a smiling Edward. "How about now, lover, before I'm too sweaty?" Edward suggests, pulling his shirt over his head, his burly, hairy chest pulling Warren into sharp focus. "Come here," Warren says, pulling Edward down to kiss him, his warm mouth again tugging at the back of Warren's mind. He fights the urge to place the feeling and pulls Edward up, leaning down to suck at his tightly tanned nipples, already feeling his erection pressing at his zipper. He pulls at them, tonguing and teasing them as Edward moans up into the canopy. "You're driving me crazy already, Warren. Come here," Edward whispers as Warren's hair. He kisses Warren again, more passionately this time, and moves to unzip Warren, roughly tugging at him, making him gasp and twist in the dirt. Edward laughs breathily, nipping at Warren's neck, jerking him and sending him into an overdrive as the two of them tease and enjoy each other. Edward stands after a while, shucking his pants and letting his turgid erection slap against his belly as he steps free. "I know you want this, Warren, don't you?" Edward asks, squatting down over him just out of reach. Warren nods insistently, his mind now completely engaged in sex, all his wandering, lost memories falling to the wayside as Edward squats deeper down, his hips below his knees. As Warren enters him, he roars, his head thrown back in passion as he continues to sink lower and impossibly lower, his flexibility a marvel to Warren as he feels the bark digging into his back while his body rocks gently to Edward's controlled, tight movements. Warren reaches up, clutching at Edward, fighting his cast, pulling at the muscled shoulders, grasping the bundles of sinewy skin, moaning and thrusting as Edward smiles. "Is this good for you, Warren? Do you like doing this with me?" Edward growls into Warren's ear. Warren finds the question odd, as if he wasn't fully aware of how much they were enjoying the sensation of Edward's taut, powerful body wrapped around the smaller man, bobbing in fits of ecstasy. "Of course, Eddie, you're the best I've ever had," Warren says, his eyes opening just as Edward shifts down onto his knees and begins to gyrate fast, bearing down. The movements jar his broken arm and leg, causing him to moan in discomfort and pleasure at the same time. Warren yelps at the tightness of it. It was the tightest he could remember being held, and when he looks up, he sees that Edward is staring down at him intently, his eyes flickering in red and yellow around the pupils. Warren shakes his head, not able to believe what he's seeing, but when he looks back up, he confirms his vision, and Edward growls, moving almost inhumanly fast, and he punches the tree behind Warren's head in ecstasy. Warren begins to feel a new emotion forming. Fear. "You can have this forever, lover. You can have me whenever you want, as much as you want, Warren. You know that you can," Edward says in a voice much deeper than he usually had. Then, as Warren looks up to see a broken, dented-in section of the tree where Edward had struck it, a hand waves in front of his face, and suddenly the fear and panic set in as Edward pumps fast and hard against him, skin slapping skin in the otherwise quiet forest. "Edward! Get off me! Stop!" Warren yells, pushing against Edward's straining chest. Edward's face falls, his eyes now blue and white. He stops moving, his eyes fluttering as he returns to himself. He lets go of Warren, sliding up and falling naked back into the detritus of the forest floor. "Lover, please, stay with me. You know how good it feels. You can have me, all of me, if you just let this happen," Edward pleads, scrambling to his knees and pulling at Warren's jeans as the smaller man stands up and pulls his pants up in a frenetic movement, trying to pull away from Edward, who is still begging. "Fuck you, Edward," Warren spits angrily, kicking his feet free and bolting into the woods in the direction of the house before Edward can stop and return him to his stupor. Warren knows there's a possibility he won't make it anywhere, but he has to try. He tramples through the woods, listening as he hears Edward behind him, his huge body smashing the underbrush, calling after him. "Thomas!" Warren screams as he breaks the tree line. He bolts still towards the house, intending to get to the gate and pray that Thomas makes it too, but he doesn't see the younger brother. His body begins to tire, his actual weak body beginning to falter as he makes it past the house to the downhill stretch of driveway. He turns and sees Edward, completely nude, smoke trailing behind him, barreling towards him from the trees. "Please! Thomas!" Warren yells again, and suddenly, just as he crests the hill and loses sight of Edward, he's tackled hard to the ground, the wind rushing out of his lungs. "Don't move," Don't scream, Warren hears Thomas whisper in his ear. Warren freezes, doing his best to regulate his rough breathing as he spots Edward coming towards him. He tenses, as Thomas does, and Edward bolts past them towards the gate, his body a deep maroon, morphing as black wings spring from his back. He launches up into the air, heading towards the gate down the hill. As he draws away, Thomas relaxes around Warren, not moving from over him but loosening his grip. "Are we invisible?" Warren whispers. Since he can still see himself, his arm and leg were both on fire. "Yes. Don't move," Thomas hisses as Edward swoops overhead before moving further away towards the opposite end of the house. "What do we do? He tried to convince me," Warren whispers, explaining to Thomas quickly what had happened. Thomas lets out a low growl. "It's happening today. It has to. Hold my hand. Do not let go," Thomas instructs as Edward lets out a massive screech somewhere on the property. Carefully, the two of them stand, Warren only able to feel Thomas's hand on his as he's pulled towards the fence line. "Hurry!" Thomas rushes, moving closer as Warren struggles to keep up. They're now running, the gate drawing closer, and suddenly it begins to open. "Shit! The pressure plate!" Warren curses, and then Edward shrieks again, but right over their head. A returning, higher-pitched wail comes from the house. Suddenly, Warren smashes into an invisible Thomas who had stopped short, and Warren trips, tumbling free of Thomas's grasp, and rolls to the edge of the gate. Thomas materializes in front of him as he jumps to his feet, chest heaving. "Warren!" Edward roars, nose-diving towards Warren. Then the demon's body is smashed by an invisible force, wings spreading out and spiraling into the lawn to Warren's left. When the human looks up, Lila is rushing down from the house, hovering inches above the ground like a speeding car. She screams again, heading towards her older son as he tries and fails to get up from the impact with the earth. "Thomas, hold the gate!" Warren yells, and Thomas is already holding his hands out, the gate creaking against the invisible force. "Warren Wells, you will pay," Lila bellows, but suddenly she stops short. "Let me go, child, or you will meet the same fate," she directs at Thomas, who now had one hand pointed at the gates and the other at his mother, who struggled against him in place. "Now!" Thomas yells, and Warren steels himself. "Lila, I won't do this anymore. We're striking a new deal," Warren says, his voice shaking and body quivering. Lila lets out a horrid laugh. "You have no leverage," she squalls. "I do. I'm prepared to leave. I have no reason to stay. My mother has died." Warren lies on instinct, and he sees Thomas twist his head in question, his body shaking violently as he tries to hold his mother. Edward begins to crawl towards Warren, his broken wings dragging on the ground behind him. "Lover, please," Edward moans. "You wouldn't dare," Lila says quietly. "Try me," Warren says, taking a step back. "Warren, I can't hold her much longer," Thomas moans, sinking to his knees. "Lila, let me go after a year and I'll give you what you want," Warren bargains. 20 years, she spits. 3, Warren counters. 20 years, she remains firm. Warren takes another step back. She shimmers from her place on the lawn. "Fine, 15, she tries. Another step back. "Warren Wells, you will kill every family member you've ever loved," she screeches. "She's dead. She was all there was left," he bluffs, and she begins to vibrate at an inhuman frequency, her body a blur. Suddenly, Thomas yells in pain and falls flat to the ground. "You are a fool, Warren Wells. I have ways of keeping you here," Lila says, and she waves a hand in front of him, but nothing happens. She tries again. Still nothing. "What will it be, Lila?" Warren asks, and Lila lets out a scream of frustration. Warren can see Thomas is quivering as he tries to stand back up. 10 years, Warren Wells, 10 years and you are free, unless you give me an heir first," she says in a disgusting attempt at sultry. Warren knows this is too long of a time to stay here, but he couldn't condemn his family to death. He would still be young enough after 10 years. 10 years with the property back the way it was, and you don't hurt Thomas, and no more Edward, Warren asks, power returning to his voice. No, Warren, that's too long," Thomas shouts as Edward gets close to Warren to clutch his pant leg. "You don't want me, lover?" he mutters, dejected as his wings flap brokenly over his body. "Fine," Lila agrees, flicking a wrist. Edward's neck twists and snaps in an instant and his body flops to the driveway. Warren looks at him horrified as his body begins to dissolve, turning into a pile of ash in a matter of moments. Warren Wells, you must seal it with a kiss, she says sensually in her normal young voice. She draws closer. Don't! Thomas yells, and he struggles forward, holding the gate open and stepping with the weight of the world on his shoulders towards the other two, but Lila is much closer. She draws near, smoke swirling up over her until she returns to her original form, with her beautiful red hair and tight, limber body. She smiles, her teeth still sharpened and horrifying. Kiss me, Warren Wells, bind the pact, she goads, and as Warren gives one last thought to turning and running, he steps towards her, ready to commit. No! Thomas roars. He drops his hands and the gates begin to creak closed. Lila turns around as he steps and claps a hand towards them. She reaches out as if to throw him with her force, but he is quicker and he flicks his arm out with a shrill yelp. Her body hurtles back, flying through the air until she draws to a still, floating state 100 feet away and 30 feet in the air. You can't. Please, Warren, don't worry about me. Just ask for less time, Thomas says as quickly as he can while Lila rushes back towards them. Thomas, I won't condemn you too. You deserve to live, Warren says as Lila draws closer. She barrel rolls towards Thomas, who looks up in fear. If you won't release him, I will, he shouts at his mother, and just as the gate is about to click shut, he rushes Warren, throwing his body over his shoulder. They fly at the gate, which Warren watches whiz past him as he passes through, falling to the ground as soon as he's over the threshold. No! Please, ruler of hell, please show me mercy, please have... Lila screams up into the air from behind the fence. He watches in horror and fascination as she's silenced. The world grows darker with clouds and lightweight materializing from all over the property. She stands as a twister forms over her, thunder clapping all around them as the storm draws to the ground. She screams at an ear-splitting level, and suddenly she's silent, and the twister dissipates as quickly as it had formed. No more fanfare, no more sound as the sky lightens back up and Lila is gone. Warren pulls at the gate, prying at it to try and open it. He shakes, running it to the keypad to let himself in. Thomas, he shouts, worried that he couldn't see him and that he didn't see him disappear. No one answers. Warren punches in the code and the gate grinds, refusing to open. Thomas, please, Warren calls, trying to spot his friend. Warren pulls at the gate as he watches it shimmer, turning into the rusting, broken thing that it really was. He looks up the drive and watches the lawn disappear, replaced by tan, dried dust and dead trees and bushes. The driveway shimmers and breaks down into an overgrown, unkempt dirt and gravel path. No! Warren shouts, pulling at the gate until he hears a snap and the gears give way, letting it swing open. He runs up the path towards the house, not giving a thought to Edward or Lila as he finds the house in a broken state of disrepair. Piles of broken shutters on the ground, the windows are mostly shattered, the siding is falling off of the structure. Thomas, Warren mutters, falling to his knees. Warren? Warren hears Thomas call. Thomas, where are you? Warren shouts, seeing no sign or anything of life. I don't know, Thomas says, and he sounds so close, like he's standing right in front of the human on his knees. Thomas, I can't see you, Warren says, thinking the demon was invisible. He shuts his eyes, and suddenly Thomas is there in front of him, standing in the blackness of his mind. He opens his eyes in a panic. I don't know where I am, Thomas says, and Warren takes a deep breath. I think I do, he says out loud. How? Where? Thomas's voice sounds confused, scared. I can see you, Warren says, and he hears a small huff. What? Where am I? It's dark, Thomas says in a panic. I think you're inside me, Warren says, and Thomas sounds like he laughs. That's impossible, Thomas says in Warren's mind. Warren closes his eyes again, keeping them shut as he sees Thomas. Can you see me? Warren asks. He can see Thomas look around. No, Thomas says. Walk forward, Warren tries. I can't, Thomas says, and Warren has an idea. He pictures the house in front of him, conjuring his surroundings in his mind's eye. Suddenly, Thomas looks around as Warren solidifies the feeling and places around him in his head. There you are. What's happening? Is my mother gone? Thomas asks, walking towards Warren in his mind. She's gone. It all is. I think it worked, Warren says as Thomas draws near where Warren had pictured himself standing. So why am I still here? Thomas asks. Warren smiles, imagining himself reaching out to touch Thomas. Thomas smiles. Because you're inside me. In my head, Warren says, and Thomas lets out a sigh. Are you sure? Maybe I'm just screwed up and invisible, Thomas says, but Warren shakes his head. Watch this, he says, and pictures them standing in his apartment back in the city. What the? Thomas breathes. I guess you're stuck in here, Warren says. I possessed you? Thomas asks, and Warren nods. I never got my power. Edward got wings, my mother could change appearances, but I never found mine. I guess I have, Thomas says. Warren laughs, reaching his arms out in the real world, and Thomas seems to react, but Warren couldn't feel it. I guess you did, Warren says. Can you feel me? Thomas asks, looking around the room. No, but at least you're alive, sort of, Warren says. Thomas nods. Do you think if I leave, you'll stay in my mind? Warren asks. Yes. Possessors can go out freely in their hosts, from what I understand, Thomas says. Good. I need to rest. Is that okay? Warren asks, opening his eyes and trudging through the barn where he knew there was spare gas for the truck, which still stood in the street where it had been left when he broken his arm. He looks down to see that his leg was bleeding through his jeans, his broken arm throbbing in its cast. It's fine, Warren. I'll be here, Thomas says, as Warren lugs a fuel can all the way down the driveway, fuels up the truck, and drives it into town. He had grabbed a change of clothes and cleaned himself up in the dilapidated house, which held his clothes and broken-down dressers in a molding closet. He checked himself into the town's bed and breakfast. He laid down on the hard mattress as soon as the door shut behind him. Prologue. His eyes shut and he slept. He slept like he hadn't in months, which was mostly true. When he finally had the energy to dream, his mind conjured the house, as it had been when Lila had controlled it. He found himself in the great room looking out the window onto the vast, expansive lawn. Can you see me? He hears from behind him. He turns and Thomas is standing there, his eyes glittering in the dim room. Yes, Warren says breathlessly. He rushes towards Thomas, who catches him in a tight embrace. He was solid, Warren realized. He could feel him and touch him. How? He asks as he leans back. You're dreaming, Warren. That's a demon's domain, Thomas says with a small smile. So, the only time I can see you is in my dreams? What kind of life is that for you? Warren asks. It's better than the alternative, and at least now I can see the world, Thomas says, kissing Warren gently. Warren returns the moment with a fervor of someone starved for weeks now sitting in front of a 4-course meal. I can't believe it. I'm free? You're still here? How did you know it would work? Warren asks when he pulls away, and Thomas smiles again. I didn't. I just knew that it would get you out. It was my plan all along to push you through the gate when my mother wasn't expecting it, he explains, and Warren grows solemn. And what did you think would happen to you? Warren asks. I didn't care. I told you that I only cared about getting you out, Thomas says, and Warren can't help but feel a bit guilty. Don't feel bad, Warren. I know you spent your time on the property confused. I just didn't have the same issue, Thomas says, and Warren laughs. You can hear my thoughts in here? He asks. More like feel them, Thomas explains, and Warren kisses him again, so happy to be free and even happier that Thomas was still alive, even if he hadn't been as kind and caring of Thomas as he should have been. So can I see you every night? Warren asks. And every time you close your eyes, if you want, Thomas says. I do. I'll show you the world, Thomas, through my eyes. It's the best I can do as a non-demonic regular human, Warren says, with a laugh, shifting consciously so that they were on a beach in Cabo that he had visited as a kid. It was his favorite place to visit in his daydreams. He twists his toes in the sand and smiles at Thomas, who strokes his cheek sweetly in the setting sun. Waves crash around them and they hold each other, both of them ecstatic to be out from under Lila and Edward's rule. Thomas pulls away and speaks as the sun dips below the watery horizon. You, Warren Wells, are anything but regular. That's it. That's the story. That's the last chapter and the prologue. I just lumped them all into one so I wouldn't have to do this again next week. But I like this ending. I knew this would be the ending from like chapter 5. That basically what would end up having to excuse me, I hate Taco Bell. What would end up having to happen is that Thomas would sacrifice himself for Warren, but in turn would survive, sort of. kind of survive. He doesn't have a body anymore, but at least he's kind of alive. His consciousness is still there. I really think this is kind of a fitting ending. Warren walks away with nothing. Thomas gets to exist outside of the four walls that he was used to. Edward is gone. I like Edward's death. It's so simple. It's so quick. Just a snap of his neck and he dissolves. I like how carelessly Lila does it. Like, she couldn't care less about her own child and she snaps his neck. I do think there's some subtlety and nuance that's lost when someone is reading a story to you and you're not reading it yourself, like written word. But I still think that effectively you can kind of picture what's happening between all of them. But what I do want to say about this story in general, this chapter, this story, is it's a first draft. So what I've presented to you is basically a full first draft, an outline, a really detailed outline of a novel. I had to keep telling myself that I wasn't presenting you with a finished novel. I was presenting you with a work in progress. I was presenting you with an outline of what the story really was. So when you hear it, when you listen to it, if you ever do go back and listen to it or you recommend it to somebody, be sure to take note that it's not a finished, polished, read and reread and edited 10 times over story. It's a first draft. But I really like it. It was my first venture into horror. It was my first move away from something that ends in, I don't know, it ends in a romance, but it doesn't really end in romance. You know what I mean? It's kind of just two people relieved to be alive, relieved to be free. It's not so much two people deeply in love who will spend the rest of their days together. Or, well, I guess they will, but it doesn't have to be romantic, you know? That's kind of what I wanted to do with this story, and I think I accomplished it. Is it perfect? No. Will it ever be perfect? No. Is it the next great American novel? No. But that's not what I'm aiming to do. I'm bringing the queer life to something straight, something heteronormative, the Harlequin romance novel, the sexy demon story. It's always straight. Why not make it gay? What's wrong with making it gay? I've done that here. I'm not going to harp on it anymore. I'm not going to drag it out. You've had to hear my voice enough. But I want to thank you for listening or watching, if you are watching, for consuming this content any way that you have, because it's been a wild journey, to say the least, over the last 4 seasons. And that brings me to the future of the podcast. It's going to continue. Of course, I'm going to take some time off because I need to start working on the next story. I don't know exactly how long that'll be, probably about a month, just so that I have time to work up a few chapters before I start presenting them to you. I don't know which story I'm going to do next. At first, I wanted to do a shipwreck story. Then I wanted to do a murder story. And I'm not really sure where I'm going to go. What has been the most successful with this podcast has been the reality, has been Drabble, has been We Just Call It Love. The Wells House phenomenon listenership has really fallen off. I guess people didn't like it that much. That's fine. So maybe next season we'll move into a murder mystery. We'll try our hand at a murder mystery and see if that's any better. See if you like that better. But I'll be back. I'll be back in probably about a month. I don't have the math here to do that for you, but I'd say the beginning of July. I'll be back with a new story to share with you for Season 5 of the Floor Rejects podcast. But until then, you know I appreciate that you listen and that you watch and that you care. So I'll be back. I'll bring something crazy, funky, fun, and fresh to you soon enough, as soon as I can recharge my creative battery and not feel like I'm going to lose my freaking mind. But I appreciate you. I really do. So until next time, I will bid you adieu. That was gross. Okay, bye.